I'm Rafael Barker, and this is the Appalachian Creative, episode 10.
Hello and welcome to the Appalachian Creative Podcast. My name is Jacob Holmes, and I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Jerry Buckner.
And Jerry, what do we have on deck today?
We're talking to Rafael Barker. Raf, tell us a little bit about what you do.
So I am a freelance photographer. I've been making imagery for about 10 years and then full-time since 2021.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. And I'm based in the Charleston area. I have a studio on the west side, and I primarily focus on portraiture. I do a lot of event photography as well. I do some food photography, branding photography, but primarily people is my focus.
Gotcha.
And he's the best, man. All my headshots are done by Raf. So
Thanks, man.
Yeah, we were talking just this week that, and I'm sure it's the same with every market, is there's different photographers and videographers that corner each section of the market, and you have the professional and creative headshot space, just absolutely. And then in Charleston alone, the events, I mean, that's you, man.
I think it's important. Something that I read somewhere was, it is good to be skilled in many different type of areas, but it's not good if you're trying to become a professional because then people don't know you or remember you for any particular thing.
Right. You don't get to be the expert.
Right. And so it's a lot better to have something where you say, this is the lane that I want to take, hyper-fixate on that, and then, oh, but I can also do this too. Because I think for entrepreneurs who are really trying to get into this space, marketing yourself as being available to do everything, two things happen. You don't know what the price point is that's correct for the different avenues that you can go into. And then the second one is what we just talked about. No one will remember that you're doing it.
Yeah. Well, and success and quality are so subjective, and as a creator, you can find success delivering what somebody else might say is a subpar product. That might be absolutely the best you can do, and you're astonished and tickled, and your client can be tickled and all that stuff, but there's levels, especially I feel like in photography.
And we've talked about on the podcast before how I recommend, and I loved your feedback on it, I recommend, when I first started, the thing was niche down, find your niche, do that. When I first started, I purposefully and made it a point to not do that because I didn't go to film school. I, wanted to learn as much as I could and figure out where I fit in the market. Mm-hmm. Once I found the hole and what I enjoyed doing, once I found the hole in the market, I was able to, that's when I niched down. And I priced myself out of other things. And I know you have done attempted to do that at least with a couple different types.
That's interesting. I think when we talk about getting involved in the creative space, you tend to want to fulfill something within yourself that's missing. And so for me, I was selling insurance for a number of years. I just finished my master's degree, and I was trying to figure out what else could I kind of add to my routine that would be fulfilling. And I recognize that in a family that is fairly creative, I was not being creative in the way that I had been in my youth. And so I was just like, well, let me see how I can rectify that. And so I purchased a camera in the winter of 2013. And the space that I ended up penetrating was I recognized that I didn't know the camera settings. I didn't really understand what the exposure triangle was, for example, or how to shoot manually. Mm-hmm. But I knew that was something I was curious about. I knew that I wanted to get into that. And so in order to do the best that you can, I tell people, practice trumps theory every single time. Mm-hmm. You can learn all you want. You can be as book smart as you can. You can be consuming all the YouTube videos, all the books, all the seminars. But if you're not actually practicing with the actual devices, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So I took a camera that I'd purchased. It was a Nikon D5200 was my first camera. And I would go to Taylor Books on Fridays or Saturdays whenever they would have their live musicians. And I would practice shooting in manual and getting the settings kind of dialed in and seeing what the space was, shooting natural light.
If I do this, this happens.
Right.
If I do this, this happens.
But the funny thing that I didn't recognize because I'm socially awkward is that after the shoot, the musician would come up to me and say, "Oh, hey man, who do you shoot for? Who are you working with? Are you with the paper? And hey, where can I find these images?" I was like, "I'm just practicing." But okay, well, we'll figure this out. And so it's kind of funny because you kind of then start building a network. But at the time, I realized, I'd had friends that were involved in the music scene in Charleston that peripherally, the ones that you're like local bar scene, and they were wanting to have more shows. And I thought, okay, well, one of the easier ways that you can get more shows is by having imagery of you,
better marketing,
of you performing, better
absolutely.
marketing. And so that was really the lane that I tried to go into first. There were a few other photographers in the space that were doing that sort of work, but I don't know that there was the same degree of intention behind how can we elevate the marketing for the individuals. Mm-hmm. So that was how I niched down initially, and it was twofold. It helped me learn the settings, and it made it very evident that I had an eye, because I wasn't trained in school for photography. When I went to Shepherd, I did study mass comm, and I had a concentration in video editing, but that was more the editing of the work that we had done as a team, right? They would give me the content and then I'd put it together. And I really didn't want to get into video. So I never really picked up a camera for that purpose. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting because I remember in college when we would have our cohorts and we would be doing our projects, our video projects, I realized that I did have opinions, oh, maybe what if we do this? What if we do that? And that comes from just years and years of consuming movies and being a fan of cinema and going to theater all the time and seeing movies by myself. I'm one of those people, feel comfortable seeing movies alone, with friends, having dialogue afterwards of what was the most impactful stuff. And so having the opportunity to shoot in that space where the artist isn't saying, hey man, stop shooting. Because you're not walking up to somebody and saying, hey, may I take your photograph? And
I'm just shooting them.
Learning. You're shooting.
Yeah.
They're doing their thing. And then organically you can show them afterwards what you've created. Oh, but I'm going to go ahead and edit this when I get back to the house. You want one or two of the images? Sure. We start exchanging information. And that was in 2013, 2014, how I really started to penetrate the community in the art space that way. And it was honestly from that I then became a volunteer DJ at WTSQ. I had a jazz radio show in college when I attended Shepherd a decade before, but it was an opportunity to get back into that space because now again I had free time. My master's degree had been finished, and I was just selling insurance 9 to 5. So from 5 until whenever I was available. Right. And that was one of those things. The job was a job of convenience. I had a wonderful boss. I worked with State Farm and did really, really well with them. And that also got me connected to the community in a sales position that helped me learn how to overcome my social awkwardness. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I thought it was, in my head, I was like, I don't think you're socially awkward, but I didn't know you back then. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And honestly, when you are 23 or 24, which was what I was when I started there, and I'm there for 11 years, I mean, the version of me that went in is not the version that left. Yeah. And so that was really one of the things where I've said that my boss at the time helped to raise the adult that I am now, for good or bad, there are things that I have left back there, But I will say, so that gave me the opportunity to say, okay, now I have free time in the evenings to do the creative space, going to the bar scene, going to the music concerts, going to having my jazz radio show, connecting with musicians that way, becoming a board member for the West Virginia International Film Festival, which is a nonprofit in Charleston that's been around since the mid-'80s. And at the time, we operated a 2-festival format where we had a festival in the spring and the fall where we would bring international films, documentaries, and local movies. But over the course of the last 10 years, we then have developed a brick and mortar theater. We have an art house cinema below Taylor Books. It's a 30-seat cinema. And so now we're really an organization that's helping to operate a movie theater. Right. And we will eventually put together more festivals, and that is something that's built into and baked into our ethos and what we want to do because we want to promote the filmic arts, kind of like what Jacob's doing. But at the end of the day, like that gave me another outlet to connect with other creatives.
Okay. So I'm glad you brought up your history and your schooling and all that, because I think one of the most inspirational things that I know about your past is that you are not only a product of adoption, but you weren't even born here. So tell us about, kind of your background and all that, because that's a story that I think is so inspiring. And then to see how you went from what is generally considered a pretty, I don't want to say traumatic, but a difficult upbringing to, what I consider to be one of the best photographers in West Virginia.
Thank you, man. I had this conversation with a couple friends of mine last night. I had a job in the studio where we were making imagery for the West Virginia Women's Alliance, and they are a nonprofit that is working to promote cross-partisan. They're doing cross-partisan work to help elevate women and children in West Virginia. And one of the projects that we're doing right now is that this is their second year that they've put together a calendar that is kind of a fundraiser device. You know, it's the men of the West Virginia Women's Alliance, and they have, you know, different months. They'll have different themes, and at the end of the production, they're going to have quotes that'll be on the calendar. 84 agencies putting it together. But after the last shoot was last night, we've met 4 or 5 times for this specific calendar cycle, and I had a conversation with the executive director and her husband, and one of the things that I was talking about was, you know, why I'm able to do what I do in the way that I do it. And I think the adoption speaks to that, because when you are hypersensitive and you are put in a situation to become resilient, to overcome whatever barriers might have been present, the superpower that you develop is being able to connect with other people quickly,
Right.
and identify who they are, even sometimes before they're able to find that within themselves.
Right.
And then the resiliency of being self-aware, right? So I was blessed with a pairing between myself and my parents who adopted me that was perfect. And I tell people, no matter what scenario you're in, the perfect is never perfect, really. You know, so like even with the perfect parent suited for me, there were still growing pains on all of our parts, right?
Right.
But it makes it easier for you to have that baseline that's a really solid grounding, right? So that you can find yourself, and then that enables you to then see the world in the right way, you know? And so the work that I try to do whenever I'm making imagery of other people is, how can I make this, it's not necessarily a piece of art, but how can I make this image properly represent the version of you that's sitting in front of me now, not necessarily trying to reclaim something from before or trying to present some fictional version of yourself. So I try to hold space that is very safe so that you can be extremely vulnerable, but also honest, because I think that the image is going to be the most honest thing.
Well, those emotions, they get buried by us every day. You know, by walking the street and having to face the people that we face every day, we bury some of those deeper emotions. And so being able to connect with, you know, somebody through the lens and being able to say, hey, come on, we need to...
Being able to bring that out.
You owe it to yourself to explore this emotion. You know, you don't have to just bury it down right now.
And that's a talent in itself. Photography, video, you know, anything else aside, being able to have people be vulnerable with you, complete strangers, not just people. I mean, these are people that you met on Facebook and said, yeah, hey, come by the studio. Being able to work with them and have them be vulnerable is huge. That's a talent alone.
Well, and it's also something that you have to be very capable of recognizing your capacity load as well, you know. And so me being somebody who also jumped into entrepreneurship after recognizing that I wasn't necessarily the best suited for a 9-to-5 kind of structure.
Yeah.
You know, who I needed more time day to day to give myself room to get the appropriate amount of sleep, or to make sure that I'm eating well, and then just giving myself private space to recharge.
Right.
You know, because for years when I was selling insurance, and then when I was constantly doing 10,000 different things in the past version of myself that I talk about, you know, I was wearing myself thin to the point that I didn't realize how much I was burning myself out.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't the version of myself that would be most capable of finding who you are,
Right.
and then making that image. And so one of the things in the studio space, or if I'm on location, I'll use a studio session as an example. Let's say Carson comes into the studio and he wants a headshot. One of the things that I first do when you walk in the door is, what were you listening to in the car on the way over here? And it's
Katy Perry's Firework.
And it's funny because like one of the small things that we can say about ourselves is, you know, that it's a big deal for us is what we listen to, or the hobbies that we have, the interests that we have. You know, he might say, I was just listening to a podcast, and I was like, okay, who was the last musician you listened to? And he gives me an artist, and I say, oh, okay. I throw that on because I want to try to create a space that feels as organic as an inorganic space can feel.
It's comfortable.
As comfortable.
Yeah.
And then, even if I knew that Carson was coming in for professional headshots as an actor, right, and I kind of have an idea of what sort of imagery he needs to present to a casting agent,
Right.
I'm still going to ask him, all right, what are we doing? What are you trying for? What type of roles are you trying to pursue? Because that's going to dictate the type of image that we're going
The
to
emotions
show.
you need to put out there. And
The emotion or just the character.
yeah.
And for someone like Carson or anyone that does acting, like that's a good point because they're going to have to come up with a character. And I say, okay, find that character. Oh, I like that. And I see it in their eyes or I see it in the presentation that they're giving me. I said, whatever you just did,
Where they
hold
soften
that.
the muscles in their face.
Exactly.
And,
And then it's just like, well, I want to be in more comedic roles. Okay. Well, you're not going to get broad light or short light. It's going to depend
right.
on what I'm going to give you based on what type of role you're doing.
Right.
I think in terms of still photography, it's a little bit more important to pull those emotions out than say in video. Now, when you're doing film, yes, you have to get certain emotions out of your talent, but you get 90 minutes to tell a story,
And you also get
that is able to pull that emotion out,
Yeah.
and these other elements.
you get music and
whereas
B-roll.
in a photo, you have that nanosecond that you have to utilize and use.
Yeah, and that's something when I dabbled with photography, I wouldn't want to say I dabbled. I did photography for a long time, and that's something that when I did my first paid video piece, that's what I loved is I don't think I was ever very good at telling a story in a photo, and I still don't think I'm very good at it. When I see people on TikTok or Instagram share their pictures and the comments are like, what's the story here? I'm like, look at their stuff. I'm like, what's the story? I don't know. And it's because I personally just can't tell a story in a fraction of a second, and that's why I love videos, because you get the music and you get everything to kind of compound what the talent's giving you. And I think that some people, I've heard the argument that photography is superior to video and vice versa. And I actually think that they're both completely different skill sets that are just both have their talent. But I think photographers that can accurately capture the emotion, whether that be the winning catch on a football game or that be
Devastating loss after a disaster or something.
You did one a couple of weeks ago with the vertical vixens in Clarksburg. Yeah. And I was looking at those, and of course my wife looked at my phone when I'm looking at people on a pole like that.
So for people that don't know,
explain who they are.
So Vertical Vixens is a pole fitness gym in Clarksburg that my friend Maggie operates, and it's an amazing, inclusive, uplifting space that she has created over the last 10 years. And what I went to do back in February was I made some imagery for some of her quote unquote vixens, and those she calls, you're a vixen if you're one of her monthly members,
right?
So, and it's a pole dancing studio, but it's a fitness gym. They do yoga, they do exercise. I mean, it's really an athletic sport thing,
right?
But the other piece of that, and this is to the point that you're about to get to, is it's very empowering for the individuals who decide that this is how they want to get fit.
Yeah.
So it's the alternative to going to the 24-hour gym or popping into Planet Fitness and, having your workout in front of a bunch of other people.
Right.
You get to have this kind of experience where you're working on, in the same way that a basketball player can work by themselves to develop certain skills, they get to work on themselves to build confidence.
But they also have to overcome the hurdle of the societal, standards that are
That's
out
exactly
there.
right.
Yeah.
So I was looking at your pictures, and there was one picture in particular. You'll probably know it as soon as I say it, but I was just sitting there looking at it, and it was and I had a conscious thought that that isn't a picture of. It was one of the girls that was horizontal, and I think she was only hanging on with her legs. And I was looking at it, and I was like, that's an amazing feat of physical capability. And the picture to me didn't show a pole dancer, right? It showed me somebody who is lifting themselves up through only their core muscles. Right. And that picture alone told me that Vertical Vixens, because I didn't know what they were until I saw your thing, is a fitness studio and not a strip club or something like that, where pole dancing may be more available. You know what I mean? Not available, but
it's interesting. Like I even go so far as to say, I support the idea that whatever presentation you want to share with the world is as long as it's an honest representation of who you are or the way that you want to be. I'm for it. So strip clubs and pole dancing, if it's meant to be in that sort of capitalistic, not sex space, it's not sex work necessarily, but you just performative space, then great, do that, because you then are adding the layers in the sense that, if you're just putting together a dance routine that incorporates pole, that would almost be the equivalent of the photographer who's just capturing the still image. But then if you're then also then performing for a singular individual and you're having to tell a story physically with that individual, either on a pole or lab, whatever it is, then you are then giving that narrative thread that would be more the video product.
Yeah,
Right.
So I think that's kind of an interesting kind of way to tie in what we were just talking about. But at the end of the day, the reason that I jumped into that sort of work was because a friend of mine was one of her vixens and had referred her to me and had said to her, I believe that he's the type of person who could really properly and accurately represent your clients, your members, in a way that doesn't sexualize them, in ways that they don't want.
Right.
That it's an image that's not through the male gaze.
Right.
We have to consider the motive behind the photo.
Right.
So
Well, and I'll tell you, there's the opportunity that I've encountered a few times. There was a session a few weeks ago for the calendar shoot for the West Virginia Women's Alliance where one of the women had said, I don't typically like photos of myself, and I don't feel confident in front of the camera. I don't take selfies, and I very rarely take photos with my kids or whatever. And in most cases, we know, your wife probably is that person who's taking photos of Tobin, right?
Yeah.
And in most family environments, it's usually the mother who's the one taking the photos. I know my mother was in our family the photographer.
Our camera rolls look very different.
Right. and what their focus is going to differ widely from ours, right?
Yeah.
right.
So I was able to say, I walked up to her and I was like, look, all we're doing here is showcasing your strength.
Yeah.
And if I can just look at you and see just how you are standing, just as you are, let me just observe for a moment. No judgment. The camera's not on. I'm not taking the shot. I just kind of want to talk with you for a second. And that's the second piece. So I talked about how, I have bring the music in and then we have a conversation about what the image is going to be. The second piece is I observe you. I don't pose you right away, because I think if I can see how you organically exist within yourself, then I'm going to be able to then see you look more comfortable like this, but let's go ahead for the image, slightly make an adjustment here, slightly make an adjustment on how you're focusing your gaze.
Right.
Because then I have to also then give you the coaching of, okay, this is your key light, and you want to make sure that your eyes are at least in the direction of the key light. You don't have to be staring at it, because I don't want to see the whites of your eyes, the sclera, right? I want to actually see that the light is hitting into the pupils, right?
Right.
Into the meat of the eye, right? And so if they don't have that coaching, there's the opportunity that could exist where you have everything perfect, but you have no soul in the shot because there's no light in the eyes.
Right.
And then you can show them, and that's the other piece too. You can show them what they're doing, and then they get liberated because all of a sudden they recognize, whoa, I do have control over this image to a degree that's more than what I thought, because I was walking into this space expecting you as the expert to make the image for me.
Right.
But now I recognize that there is this back and forth interplay. It's a dance for the both of us to kind of coordinate.
So I want to say something. I know I've never told you this. I actually don't know that I've ever said it aloud before. And it's, I guess, a guy thing. I don't know. But I've taken 2 headshot sessions with you. One before I got my job with the news, which I tried to throw a little bit of my camera in there and make it a little bit more me, but also get professional headshots out of it. And then when I went to be self-employed, I wanted straight director headshots. No idea what that meant. I came in with an idea. And pro tip for anyone getting headshots out there, tell the photographer, go off, because I think every time I go in the studio with Rafael, I say, okay, we got what I want. Now go off. And I think every time I've done that, I've bought the one that you went off on.
Right.
So anyway, you, in my last one, but the director one, you taught me how to, I don't like getting my picture taken. I understand the value of it. I will do it because it's important. I'll do it for the memory and stuff like that with family, but I don't like it. There's a reason that I chose a behind the scenes career, right?
You don't have the hair.
Well, I've got the perfect face for radio, so that's why I'm behind the camera too.
Every time I walk into, especially a studio where it's a much more formal setting than just posing in the backyard, there's a small, I've gotten over it, but it's a small amount of discomfort. And I think you can probably see that when you're doing your test lighting and stuff like that, and I'm just kind of sitting there. I would assume that you can probably see that. Well, I didn't know how to pose myself. I didn't like how I looked. I've been much larger than this most of my life. So I kind of have gotten used to that. I never liked my face. That sounds bad. I've never liked my face. And in that last session, you taught me two things to do inside my mouth and throat that this is super narcissistic, and saying it out loud is ridiculous, but that picture that you took, I don't know if you remember, but it's the red and blue horizontal lights, and it casts that cool, that's my screensaver on my editing computer.
Oh, cool.
Not because of the lights. That's obviously one of the reasons I love it, but I like how I look in that picture. And it was not, if I were to sit down and let Carson take a picture of me, it wasn't going to be what I would have done. And quite frankly, it wasn't comfortable. Like, I couldn't breathe when I was doing it because, I'm getting my double chin up. But I didn't know how to do that. So your ability to coach and pose, for you photographers out there, that is I'm not going to act like the expert here. What percentage of the job do you think, understanding you've got the sales and marketing aside, you've got the taking the picture, posing for the picture, like coaching them to how to pose, and then editing. What percentage? I mean, if you're a brand new photographer out there, what do you do? Do you just work on like the exposure triangle, or do you learn how to talk to people and stuff like that? Because that posing is what I think puts you here and other photographers here is your ability to tell me, I'm a director, right? I want to be directed. Right? We gravitate toward the things we do. Right. I want you to tell me what to do, and you do that very well. And it's not like rude and off-putting, right? It's like, oh, okay, he knows what he's talking about. I'm gonna do that.
I think the percentage question is an interesting one because, as somebody who formerly wasn't really a salesperson, and had to develop that kind of skill set, the communication piece was something that I hyperfixated on because I wanted to be so good at communicating that I could leave a conversation if I needed to because of my anxiety or because it didn't feel like it was comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so it's that kind of hyperfixation on communication that and then understanding who people are genuinely that makes it a bit easier for me to jump into the space. However, if I'm answering a percentage question, I would say it's really also very important to have an understanding of your equipment, of what you're trying to accomplish before the client comes in. Mm-hmm. And that might mean getting a marionette head,
See, he thought they thought this was silly.
No, I love it.
I use that to pull focus and to set my lights.
I wish we had to grab it so the camera.
Because I'm a solo worker. I work by myself a lot.
So your practice time, and this is such an important thing. I think to people all the time, and if it ends up being that you're back and forth between the camera and yourself, and you're constantly like diving back and forth, getting the exposure, and then coming back from the camera to the front of the camera to have the picture of you, sure, and that's an option. I would rather it be that I have somebody either in that spot or you have the marionette head or whatever it is, right? And so that you can kind of get a sense of what it is. And the thing that then becomes from that, you've got the light recipes figured out, and a light recipe, just basically for people who don't know, is you have dialed in where you want your light to be so that a certain look can be executed and that you could just step and repeat. Mm-hmm. So that that if you want that specific look, that all you're going to have to do is put that recipe together and then place the subject in front of that space. And then boom, every shot is going to be that way, right?
Right.
So now that I know that, the next question becomes, okay, which light recipe is going to be well suited to the subject? Because
this person, right?
Because before you even get into the question of what is this going to be used for, you have to look at the subject and recognize, well, for me, like my face is a bit more round, right?
Right.
Luckily, I have facial hair, so that can hide some of the subjective double chin look that people worry about, right? So it's a little easier for me to kind of pose because I'm not having to worry about that look, right? But that is something to be cognizant of, you know, how high does my camera have to be in relation to the face that I'm photographing?
And in that session, you saying that just made me remember, in that session, I think I pointed out, I don't remember the name or the company, but I know he did private security.
Yeah.
And I said, I like how this looks. And then we took a picture similar to that, not exactly the same, but same. It was black and white, a high contrast. And I did buy that one because I liked it, but it's not even in my top 3 from that shoot. But that's not
right.
The lighting and
all
the
reason why was because, and for me, like, I'm happy to accommodate, right? You say that that's the image that you want me to execute. Great. We're going to go for that because that's going to be, and that goes back to something we'll talk about in a second. But that's going to be the one that you want, right? But then then it becomes, okay, well, what's the right one, right?
Yeah.
Because I shouldn't be, as a director, posing as a private security.
No, I won't go that far, but I'll go this far. In your case, you are a producer of video and photography, but let's say you weren't, right? You've come to me to choose what your photos should be.
Right.
Right. So your taste is suited to your perception of yourself. So the body dysmorphia that I have is not whatever you have.
Right.
Right. So you're going to like a specific image for personal reasons, not because the light is hitting in a perfect way.
Right.
Right. So you almost have to teach your subjects what good imagery is. But at the end of the day, that's not what matters. What matters is how they see themselves in the shot.
Well, so like, okay, you go to your barber and you say, you're a professional, give me a good haircut. And you know, they may be able to tell you how to line up the back, whether it's square, tape, or whatever, based off of certain things in their training. But they're not going to be able to just cut your hair and it be perfect 100% of the time because of the subjectiveness of how we perceive ourselves.
Right, because they could give you a perfect lineup.
Yeah.
And just give you a buzz.
As technical and tight.
And then you look at it and you say, well, that doesn't work for how I've seen myself for the last 25 years.
Yeah. I actually have this picture of Zac Efron that I wanted. This is what I wanted. Why didn't you do that?
Right. Well, you don't have
nothing else looks like Zac Efron.
Well, and the question then becomes, well, I don't think that I recognize you as looking with the same facial structure as that person, right?
Right.
So that's the other side. So the percentage I would say is connect with the subject, get a sense of what they're looking for, understand how to use your equipment so that you can execute that. But then truly the most important, the largest percentage, because anybody can learn the exposure triangle. It's on Google. You can search it. Just look it up.
It's on TikTok, minute-long video.
Whatever, you know. And so you find it, all of a sudden you say, oh, I'm only going to manipulate one item, one point of the triangle. I'll leave the other two alone. I can choose which one, right? And then you dial in the image to what you like, right? But if you haven't spoken with your client to get a true sense of what's comfortable to them.
Right.
I had a client, and this is a very general statement. I had a client who I made their image and showed them because I shoot tethered so you can see the image, and they burst into tears. And it was such a sobering moment for me because I was like, oh my gosh, did I do something wrong?
Right.
Initially, right? It was lit perfectly.
Sometimes they've never seen themselves that beautiful before.
Well, it was the other way. They were seeing themselves as they were now. And the last time they truly had an image made of them was 10, 15 years ago. So they were self-critiquing.
Right.
And so what I saw as beautiful, that individual was just like, it doesn't look like the version of me that I'm anticipating.
Because they're remembering themselves a decade ago.
So what was really exciting about that as an opportunity was they obviously were like, you're not the reason I'm crying, but I wonder what we can do to make it so that it's as close to how I would like to be represented. Yeah. And so then it's just a matter of, oh, great. Well, one, cry all you need to. This is awesome. I'm grateful that you're having the vulnerability in the safe space that you can do that here. But two, let's do a few of these different example light recipes and see which one you feel comfortable with. Because at the end of the day, when you feel safe and you feel seen, you're going to find an image that you are grateful to have. Yeah. So by the end of the session, we'd purchased a good number of images that they were very excited for. And I was very happy because it also gave me real world experience of how to navigate that in a sensitive, heart forward way, where I wasn't just immediately defensive of, well, I did the light triangle right and I got everything in my
Lady, I've got the best camera and you're ugly.
It wasn't whoever it was,
right,
man or woman,
right.
But I think that it's very important to hold space for someone to be who they are and not to impose who you are onto them. And that's the other thing that I think as artists, since this is a creative space and a conversation about that, right? Mm-hmm. As we're talking about making or telling stories, we want to be as genuine to the subject matter. We can't go into a space assuming that we are the expert on this subject, and without the curiosity to learn. Yeah. Right. And one of the reasons I got into photography, in addition to wanting to fill a creative void that I'd had and wanting to help my friends who were musicians, was, I wanted us to have control over the narrative and not it be outsiders looking in saying, this is what we perceive our communities to look like. Yeah. And that goes back into something else that you had told me about as one of our prompts to talk about was, how I got into nonprofit work. Yeah. And the reason that I would do something like for Vertical Vixens, or why I would work with the West Virginia Women's Alliance, and why I'm volunteering for this organization or that organization.
It just seems like every nonprofit, like gala or nonprofit event, like Raf shooting it.
Well, there are a few
in Charleston.
Well, there are a few of us who are very lucky to be genuinely connected to the spaces. Mm-hmm. And so for anyone who is a creative out there who's wanting to do work, find the thing that you're already involved in. And that might be your youth group. You might be in Sunday school and you're helping the kids, right? Mm-hmm. Well, maybe that's the first space that you start practicing. What kind of story can I tell here? What can I do to kind of shape that out? Maybe ROTC, you have something where you're just like, nobody really knows this about ROTC. How can I go ahead and tell a story that would help people understand this, right? Mm-hmm. And I think being genuine is going to make it a lot easier for you then to grow, right? Because once you found your niche, it was a lot easier for you to get up in the morning to do the thing, right? When you were producing for the news, like, you were really excited because you had a team of people that you were working with, but you also had a goal at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. How can I execute the news production process the most efficient way, in a way that gets the information to the public? Yeah. But also have fun with it, because it's a lot of steps to get to the end result, right? Yeah. But honesty is the first one. Mm-hmm. And so within a community space, I realized, you're already helping coordinate volunteers for this group, and you're already trying to see that people feel like they've been seen. I think that would make sense if I start making imagery, because they need they need it as a nonprofit, so that they can then take that imagery and try to pursue more funding. Yeah. Right. Or to then have something as a point of record to say, I created this. We did this for our kids. We did this for our community. We had this race to end racism. The YWCA does one annually, right? Mm-hmm. It's a fundraiser. And to be able to have for them to have ownership of the imagery that's created from that, to then be able to use it, or to show people that this is a record of the things we've done. Right. That's crucially important.
Yeah. It's invaluable for a nonprofit.
But then the other side of that too is that it's also invaluable as a creative, because it places you in a space with others who are equally as interested in the community. Mm-hmm. They're involved. Right. And if they're involved and they see you organically involved, because you're actually interested, you're not chasing a dollar, right? You're there to do the work. Right. They're going to be more inclined to say, well, I know that Rafael was interested in helping us with our volunteers. I wonder if he would actually bring his camera too. Yeah. And we'll pay him for sure. But I already know that he knows. This is the other side of the coin, right? So he's already involved in the race annually. He knows what the chronology of the schedule is going to be. He knows what the event is. Right. I don't really have to tell him what type of imagery we need.
Right.
Because he already feels it.
Right.
It's in his heart.
Right.
And I think if we can find more creatives that are, it's an invested interest.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to be more honest, and it's going to feel easier doing the thing.
I'd agree with that.
You know, you're going to spend that 25-hour run editing, and it's not going to feel like that. It's
Yeah.
going to feel like 4 to 5 hours because you're just so excited to present the finished product.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean,
Time flies when you're editing, man.
authenticity is a tenet of my life. I mean, it's in everything that I do. I want to be as authentic as possible, and I think that was something that drew me to working with Jacob. You know, whenever I first heard about the Tri-State Film Club and what they were doing there, I was interested. You know, people getting together and doing something that I like to do. Okay, that's cool. Once I got involved, I was like, okay, well, that's cool, but how can we get this out to other people? How can we share these messages? How can we do that? And it boiled down to a genuine obligation to get the information out. Like I really feel that whether it's big or small, whatever we're teaching needs to get out.
And you came on talking about, you know, he's already there and maybe he'll do this for us. You came on and you were immediately involved in the production side of things, directing going so far as directing one of our shoots in the summer. And
that was my second meeting.
Yeah, and I took note of that. This new guy Jerry, I had like some family event. I couldn't.
Your daughter was sick or something.
Something. Yeah. It was like I could not be there. It was either going to get canceled. I texted Jerry. He said, "Yeah, I can bring my kit." And I stopped in. I dropped off a little bit of gear, and I was like, "He's like doing it." And I kind of on the drive home, I was like, "This guy. This is what I want in a lot of my members. Is I want the people to be I didn't know his experience at that point. I wanted him to be willing to
limited,
do it.
but I'm willing.
So once it came down to growing out the club and how we do that, Jerry said, "Hey, if you're ever interested, I'd be happy to help live stream stuff." And I was absolutely. You clearly already know what the club's about. I don't care to give you live stream. That's my external branding, right? That's the foundation's external image. And now he's the vice president of the nonprofit. And all of that started just because he showed up and he was involved. And then he said, "Hey, if you ever need anything, we can do this."
But I think having an active community is important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think whether we're talking about the Film Horizons or the West Virginia IFF or any of those other number of nonprofits, without that community of activity,
right,
nothing happens. You
right.
know, and I think that's very important, especially when you're working in small markets. You know, we're a cluster of small towns spread out across a state, and it's important that we are always trying to connect and stay connected.
Well, speaking to that point, I think it's also crucially important if you are working in a self-employed space as a creative that you don't operate in a silo. I think it's so important that you find others that are doing the work you're doing and uplift them and work to celebrate what they're doing. It's not competition. It's an opportunity to see that your community recognizes the value of what all of you are doing. And then how can we uplift one another? Mm-hmm. And if there's a job that maybe you had an idea for, and you pitch it to, let's say, a potential business that they didn't have that in their mindset at all. Mm-hmm. But then the price point that you present is too high. Well, the great opportunity for that is one of your friends may be able to fit the price point that they can meet. Right. And you just secured your friend a job that you didn't win it, but maybe it wasn't for you. Yeah. But now you have yet another opportunity for one of the creatives to show that the value is in the finished product, right?
Well, I feel like, especially in the creative space, usually whenever you're hearing a loud negative voice, it's from the person that's way out here who's not over here working and participating and building a community. It's usually that one person over there. Why is nothing coming my way? Why is this not happening? Why am I not catching this break? Because again, if you operate in a silo or an echo chamber and your voice is the only thing echoing back to you and you're stuck in a negative headspace, you're going to have a really
a
hard
vicious
time to
cycle.
get out of that.
Yeah.
Well, and finally, I also think, like, it's the other side of the coin is, if you're doing the work in a perspective where you have hired me to make imagery for you, and I come into the space and all I'm presenting is just how smart I am, how much I'm going to make money from this. I'm so excited because I've booked you for 15 hours and, oh my gosh, this is going to be X number of dollars, and it doesn't feel real. But if I walk into the space recognizing that my role is to uplift your work in some way,
To provide value
to provide a value,
Yeah.
then it's going to be a lot easier to humble yourself going into this space, and then recognize, how can I meet you there?
Yeah.
And that has to be the same, I'm guessing, for other people in other industries like actors. You walk into a space with a wealth of knowledge of the scene that you're going into, right? And then you see how the director wants the story to go. And maybe you have 5 different ways that you're going to present the scene with your scene partner. And the director has one very specific way that they want it to go. And maybe that's not one of the 5 ways that you've prepared to present, right? And then it's just a matter of how can you genuinely and honestly communicate so that you recognize what the director wants, you're present for your scene partner, and then you're able to be humble enough to try all the different methods to get to that place.
Yeah.
Right? And so for me, in a community space, that looks like, for me, I think, get to know the other creatives that are doing what you're doing. Be willing to offer work to them that maybe you're not able to take, either because your schedule or because of the client's budget, or maybe because it's not something that you're interested in.
It doesn't fall into your expertise or
interest.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something you don't want to do. And
I've passed on plenty of weddings.
And so same.
I laugh because
right. But then let's say you're like, oh my gosh, you need to talk to so-and-so. I really think that not only will they actually do the thing you're looking for, but I think you two could hit it off, and potentially that could end up being a relationship with them. It's just wonderful, Yeah. And then what's going to happen for that relationship with the other talent, right?
Yeah.
They're going to recognize, man,
they're going to take you out to dinner.
Well, I was just able to connect a friend outside of my working industry to a business that I work with day in a completely separate industry, but I was able to connect them to work together.
Right.
But just
what's
because
that do?
we've worked together in the past.
Well, what's that do? At the end of the day, that strengthens your friendship or professional respect you share. Because here's the other thing too. I know so many creatives as a function of having been doing this for 4 years now, full time. It doesn't mean I'm friends with everyone. It means that I know who they are and I'm able to interface with their work, and we've had conversations, and I respect everyone who's doing what they're doing.
Or I've got a pro friend that I can reach out and they would at least advise me, or they can point me in the direction.
And that's the other thing. I will tell you, there was a bid that I put in for a job, and I ended up not getting it, but preliminarily it looked like I was going to get it, but they ended up not having the budget. But when the question came from them to me of what would it cost to do X, Y, and Z, I had never done that specific arrangement before.
Right.
So I reached out knowing that the work that they were asking me to do wasn't going to be something that was in this other person's wheelhouse necessarily. They're interest-based. They did other things. They've been in the community for 30 to 40 years. So it wasn't going to be something that they're going to be like, oh, I'll do that job. I called this person. I was just like, hey, man, I know that you've encountered this before. How should I approach? So the client wants X, Y, and Z. How should I approach pricing that out? Because I'm about to communicate a response to them in an email. And he goes, oh, well, let me go ahead and tell you the way that you shouldn't do it. And the funny thing about that was exactly the way I was. That was exactly the way that I'd.
You were leaning toward.
Well, it's the way that I'd always known,
Yeah.
right? Which was, okay, well, it's going to have to be a certain flat number. Well, that flat number, if you say it without any type of context for the size of the job, they would have immediately balked. But if you gave it to them on a per head basis, it would be a lot more palatable and digestible. Yeah. And so we got so far to the point that they agreed. They wanted me to send the invoice out. But then once it got to their board that handled the finance part, that was where they were then able to recognize maybe we don't have the budget for that, which is great. That's fine. But without the guidance that my friend had given me, and again, friend, loosely, acquaintance, very generous time that they shared with me, giving me the feedback of this might be an approach for you that would work. I now have a better sense of how to navigate business in that sort of scenario again in the future.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's a way you're talking about networking, collaboration, and meeting other creatives and stuff like that. On Tuesday, we had a job together that he recommended me for, and I take your referral out to dinner at the very least. I took him out to dinner, and we were talking, and I asked him kind of a similar question about something about my contracts, and that's the kind of so I have friends that are in family that are like high up in corporate business and in IT and stuff like that. I could call them and ask contract questions, and the questions they just wouldn't get answered the right way, other than
some legalities and
like Rafael is a creative. He's done this longer than I have, and he has experienced a lot of things. And I know, just because I know the market, he's probably come into what I'm experiencing now, and he was able to give me good advice for that. So it's not just about getting the work, right? It's now I'm able to learn more about just my own business, my contracts, the things that you don't learn on a filmmaker's masterclass, And then I also want to say, you get to a point in your career. I don't think that I'm there yet, but Rafael is, where your recommendation almost makes people work harder. When I was setting up, I got to the shoot probably an hour before you, maybe an hour and a half before you. I had more to set up because of the video gear and all that stuff. But while I was setting up the lighting, every time I would look at it, I'm like, yeah, that looks good. But in the back of my head, I'm like, Rafael wouldn't like that, because I wanted it to, he referred me to this client, and I wanted it to match not my standards, but Rafael's standards. There are things that I may have shot a tad differently, not poorly, just differently, maybe framed them differently. But this was Rafael's thing, so I want Rafael to, I want to make him. I don't want to mess it up with with my end product.
Anytime you're nurturing a relationship, it's important for you to keep in mind that when expectations fall apart, that's when the relationships fall apart. And so whenever you've got a working relationship and you know the clear expectations, it does make things a little bit easier. Same thing's true in our personal relationships. When we know what's our partners want, it's easier for us to deliver on those expectations.
Right. Make me a list. I tell Becca to make me a list all the time.
It's nice whenever you have peers that you can ask and say, hey, what are their expectations? You're able to ask the ex-boyfriend, hey, where'd you go wrong? Or where could I maybe, not make the same mistakes? But being willing to ask those questions to your peers and having that space is important, because I'm sure for every friend that you would call to ask a question, there's 4 or 5 that you're like, they would know, but they're not going to answer the phone, or they're not going to be available, or this or that. So
picking up the phone can benefit people in so many different ways.
I will tell you, if you are creative,
pick up the phone every time, and I always appreciate it.
If you are a creative out there looking to get work, one of the most impressive qualities that you can have is availability.
Mm-hmm. We just talked about that.
And making sure that you respond in a timely fashion so that the person who's asking whatever they're asking feels like you value what they're wanting.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a job not because I was better than someone else, but because I responded faster than anyone else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I was my email skill set is something that, again, back to the hyperfixation on my anxiety and my social anxiety, and overcoming that by being articulate, by being well-read, and having a solid communication core, right? That's why I'm able to have that off the cuff. I can put together an email quickly.
Right. Yeah. On Tuesday, that job, the client called me at 9:15 at night night before.
Yep.
Now, you had prepped me for it and all that, and I said he's got to call me first. And after the weekend came and went, I was like, he's probably just not going to be able to do it. I don't have time. And then 9:15, I'm in bed, and I had just reached over to like grab my melatonin because I have terrible insomnia. And as I'm reaching over, my phone lights up, and it's him, and he books me for it. And I texted Raph afterward. I said, "Hey man, it's a good thing he called me at 9:15 at night because I was about to be out of it, and I probably wouldn't have got the job had the morning come around and I didn't answer the phone."
Right.
Well, it seems like the freelance jobs that I've had in the last year, they happen. Are you available 2 days from now?
Right.
You know, we're putting a crew together now.
Right. And you texted me Monday morning. Yep. And all he said was charge your gear.
Yeah.
Right. Be prepared.
Charge your gear.
I said be prepared. I anticipate
that, but that's setting expectations.
Right.
I think that's a professional thing. Yeah.
And I anticipate that this is what's going to happen.
Yep.
We'll have the opportunity to do the work. Don't wait to be ready. You have to, and that's the other thing that I tell people all the time, creatives, in relationships, in self-work, you have to be prepared for the opportunity to present itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were to call that morning, I would have put everything on the charger that morning. I wouldn't have been ready because it takes so long to charge everything.
And this goes back to, and I know that at least one of us, other than myself, is faith oriented, and it's very important that we are prayerful. Yeah. But we're also doing the actual legwork so that we can meet the prayer whenever it's ready to be presented as our opportunity.
Right.
Because it's not our time, right? It's not always going to go on our schedule.
Yeah. Right.
But you have to be ready to make that step.
You can't pray for a hole while leaning on your shovel.
There it is.
Yeah.
You have to run for the bus.
Jerry's a king at the symbolism.
Well, listen, it's like you have to run for the bus, and then the bus that's for you, you'll be able to catch up to.
Yeah,
or it will stop.
Prepare for the opportunity.
Right.
And I'm huge in all of my doings. I set expectations very well. I let people know, hey, this is what we're going to be doing next, and this is what's going to happen after that. And if anything changes in between that, I'm going to communicate that.
Right. And again, since this is a creative space for people who are interested in becoming more creative in Appalachia, another thing is when you are able to be self-aware and you're doing a creative job, it's very easy for your client to accept a timeline that isn't theirs.
Yeah.
So you can tell them, they say in their head, I anticipate it'll be tomorrow, or it's going to be 3 days from now. And you say, and you tell them, based on my backlog of work that I'm doing to catch up to yours, it'll be 14 days.
Yep.
That's the anticipated outcome. So then 8 days later, you randomly are able to finish the work and you get it to them in 9 days, let's say. Mm-hmm. Well, that's 5 days better than what you told them. And so that's going to set an expectation that you will go above and beyond what you say.
Yeah.
Yep.
For video, I do the same thing. What I've noticed, and I'm sure I would actually venture to say it's probably worse in photography, is the client, you're done shooting and the client doesn't see what you do in the edit, So they sometimes do have very, very very skewed perceptions of when their product will be delivered. What I do, I try not to give my exact dates. A couple of weeks, because there are times where I'll be in the edit and I'm like, I really want this to work, but I have to keyframe in a minute long thing, and that's a lot,
Right.
So, and I want to make it look good, and I want the time to be able to do that. Some clients don't have that ability,
right?
But some do. About delivering early, I also tend to over deliver. Weddings especially, but for example, an event that I covered last week, they just wanted a 90-second highlight reel, like commercial-esque reel. I'm providing, they don't know it yet. I didn't tell them I'm going to do it. They're just going to get the folder, and it's going to have the ribbon-cutting speech. It's going to have the some little clips that I do social media, right? So here's some clips that you can post on social media or not. It doesn't matter. But they're going to get more than they bargained for because it's, one, the client was easy to work with. It's easy for me to go above and beyond for that person. and it's a client that I would like to work with in the future, right? So if I can pay you for just covering the event and giving me a 90-second commercial, but hey, I also get this ribbon cutting speech from like the mayor and stuff like that, then I'm going to hire him because I'm going to get more. He feels like he's getting more than what he paid for. In reality, I'm slapping a LUT on and doing some sound normalization, and that's really it. But I think
it's a lot easier to, over deliver or over exceed those expectations if you lay them out clearly.
If you set the expectations.
You set those expectations clearly. It also, again, it helps the person, again, hold that space to be calm in all of this because, hey, he told me what's going to happen next. I don't have to sit here in fear and wonder what is going to happen next.
At the end of the day, that element that you are separating yourself from is not looking professional.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can tell Carson, I'm going to deliver the images on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And then on Monday, he gets the imagery. He knew. Because
it sounds great. I'm going to deliver these in 48 hours, and you're going to have these in your hand.
Well, and this is another thing for creatives as well. Be mindful of this as well. This is a cool opportunity to kind of learn something to put into your business bag, right? You also have to have awareness of what your capacity is.
Yeah.
And you have to be cognizant of what you're willing to sacrifice. So one of the things that you can also do is let them know. So normally the turnaround will be 2 weeks. But if you need it expedited, it'll be an extra X dollar amount. Yeah. And you insert that price point, knowing that if they then honor that additional price, that that job has just leapfrogged one or two of the jobs that are on your backlog. Because now you're giving yourself yet another item to itemize on the invoice you're delivering.
Yeah.
Be thoughtful of opportunities for yourself to make your work easier for you. Yeah. If you're a photographer out there, consider a la carte as an option, where you have a fee for showing up and doing the job, but then the imagery you deliver is a la carte. So they will choose the images. What that could do, if you choose to go that route, it will drastically reduce the number of images you're going to edit because you're only going to edit the ones that you're delivering to the client. And then the over-deliver point, right? Mm-hmm. Then you're going to go ahead and add your favorite ones.
Yeah.
Because back to the conversation we had earlier, he doesn't know what a good image is. I do. I'm the photographer, right?
And
he knows what's good for him.
Right.
And so now I'm in a position where I can, and you're videographer. I know, but now I can over deliver because I'm giving you my favorites too.
Yeah.
Or maybe at the end of the shoot, I know that I've got 5 minutes to break down. I'm like, let me get that one shot from me, and I'm going to gift that one to you. And that would be the go off king kind of shot where you get to do the creative one that has nothing to do with a thing, has nothing to do with what you're going to use it for. But man, it's going to be a cool looking shot for you.
It's always worth remembering also that while we are the professionals, we get to shoot, dozens of commercials a month, and, we're shooting thousands of photos a week, that type of thing. People buy photos maybe once a year, maybe every 5 years, maybe every 10 years. This might be the one time that they've decided to actually go outside JCPenney for photos. So so you have to take their experience into account. Because again, if you've gotten JCPenney photos your whole life and you've never been happy with a single one of them, man, to think about going to a professional can be daunting. To think, wow, I agreed up front to pay a lot of money to sit here.
Right.
And
I don't know. I don't know the person. I don't know them.
And I could get another JCPenney photo that's going to sit on my mantle and I'm going to hate forever.
Yeah.
And so you have those concerns and things that you have to alleviate up front. So it's tricky when you're dealing with clients.
So I want to ask, Ralph, you mentioned the a la carte. That's how, at least in my experience, that's how you've done me. And I was sitting here doing the math. I've sat down with you for 3 sessions, 2 headshots and 1 family session.
Okay.
And I believe I have purchased 23 pictures from you.
Wow.
18 to 23. It's in that range. If hold on. I've been delivered 23 pictures.
A couple of them were gifted.
Right.
Sure.
And you've gifted in every session I've sat with.
Right.
Is that something building off the advice you gave to new photographers out there considering a la carte, is that something you would recommend?
Absolutely.
Is
100%.
Throwing one in there, throwing 100%. A couple in there?
And
you actually, the director section, I didn't want to buy the one that I came with all the gear that I had.
The shot that you had set up.
I didn't want to buy it.
and so I said, I still like the way that we did it. So I'll deliver that one as an option so he has it. But it's also a reminder too. I came in with the idea and it wasn't the one that actually worked. The photographer had the right idea.
Go off.
But it was a collaboration that we arrived at the correct image, because that was the one that he spoke about where I was cross-lighting with 2 different colors, and I had it framed in a specific way between where he was and where the instrument was, the equipment was. That came from us just kind of assessing the space that we had, and then me saying, well, let's do something slightly different from what we'd already done.
Yeah, I think you wanted different colors originally, and I said, how about red and blue because of the color contrast?
Right.
Yeah,
and that I'm sure is a lot easier to gift a photo in a session when you're aware that your time's been paid for well.
Right.
You know, whenever it's hard for you to say, I'm going to go give extras when you charge $2 per photo, because it's like, I'm losing money on all of this.
Like, well, and that's the thing that I've always been kind of, it's kind of shocking to me when there are, when you see that your image maybe isn't anywhere close on a dollar per photo basis to the national average, right?
Right.
Because your work you've undervalued, right? So you've asked somebody for $150, let's say, plus tax, and then you deliver 30 images. Mm-hmm. Do the math, man.
Yeah.
Like per image, that image work costs you money.
Oh, there are people right now working
money.
really hard in videography,
right.
And they're doing it for nothing because they signed up to do it for nothing up front, and they never adjusted.
And it waters down the market too.
I don't. And that's true too, but I'll go a different direction. That undermines what your time.
Yeah, I mean, is my time not worth anything?
Right, and that's for you.
I told that to Carson. You know, he was. You know, I said, man, they're wanting you to take photos. That's great. Are they paying you anything? Okay, and then we can talk about jazzing it up and adding quality and stuff.
Right.
But like, if they're not willing to invest in you and your time personally, then why would you invest in trying to acquire better gear or acquiring this or that?
Let me reframe that for you. I go this way. So let's say somebody's willing to hire you, right, Carson, and the issue becomes that it's outside of their budget for what you're able to provide them, right? That skill that you're able to give them. Well, guess what? What you're really hearing isn't that they're not willing to pay you. That's one perception, sure. Mm-hmm. But it's they're not willing to invest in their outcome they're wanting, right? And at the end of the day, I think that's something that we are providing a service that is something that maybe they don't know what it actually looks like.
Yeah.
So back to the 240 Faces in Appalachia project, I'll use the example of how I developed that, right? I understood in my second year doing this full time that my price point was a little higher than most other people in the area. It's not the highest. There are other people that have packages that are way higher than mine, or depending on the type of work, it could be intentionally needs to be higher than what even I'm charging. But I recognize that the standard person that's going to come through my door is going to be someone who has the experience you just presented. They've been going to the mall for their photos for years, or they've been relying on Life Touch for photos for their children for years. Or their friend
with a camera.
Or their friend with a camera.
Or they're just using their iPhone.
Right.
Yeah.
And so let's assume then that the expectation is that maybe they're not going to organically feel comfortable saying, I'm going to drop $500, $600, $700, $800 on a photo session.
Yeah.
Right. I don't even want to entertain that. Right. So I saw a documentary. It's called The B-Side. It's Elsa Dorfman, I think, is the name of the photographer. Very talented, large format Polaroid photographer from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s.
Okay.
And the documentary is called The B-Side because when you booked a session with this person, the camera that they were using was this massive Polaroid that
medium format.
Huge. Yeah. Well, I mean, huge. Yeah. So it printed out this massive Polaroid.
Oh, wow.
And she only pressed the shutter twice in the session that you paid to be in her space.
Right.
You chose your favorite one and she kept the second one. And I was just like, that's interesting. So the course of the documentary, you're learning about her, you're learning about her career, you're learning about her approach, and you're also seeing all of the images that were never chosen because she's kept all the B-sides, right? And I was like, man, that's wild that somebody would actually book a session and only walk away with one image. What would that look like in this day and age? How can I make that work for my time to be valuable?
Right.
So this concept came up to me November of 2022. I was like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do then. This is cool. Okay. It might have been in 21 and then 22 was my first year, maybe. I can't remember when. But anyway, I came up with the idea and I was just like, okay, well, what if I started to do a session at a price point that would be accessible where people could come in and it's not going to be the 250, 350, 500, whatever the dollar amount is that I normally would charge, right? But it's going to be a number they can feel comfortable. I'm going to pay that. I'm going to go to the studio and I'll get a couple images.
Right.
So originally the structure was $50 plus tax to book the session. You walk away with 2 images, which is insane because
a la carte or just
you walk away with 2
for the 50.
For the 50,
yeah.
Which is the standard nationally right now is $45 per image.
Okay.
So I'm losing money,
right?
Conceptually, right?
Right.
But what's happening is
they're buying 2 other photos because
Hear me out. Don't get ahead of yourself. Yeah. So, in my mind, I'm setting the structure. Because I'm giving it away, you're going to get the format that I'm presenting. So for me, for it to be a concept that makes sense uniformly, I'm shooting it with my 35 millimeter. Every single session, 35 mil. I'm shooting it in a square crop, which is a non-standard crop. Usually people do 5x7, 8x10. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're getting a square crop, and it's black and white image. So now it's this stylistic choice. So you're booking this session with me because you want to accommodate one of the session options that exists.
Right.
Let's say one of them is 30-second hug, where you're going to embrace your son or daughter or your pet for 30 seconds, right? And then I take the image. I did that because in that 30 seconds, usually the dog or the cat or the child has either done 2 things. Either they've embraced you and they've leaned into it, or they start squirming.
Right.
Either way, it's going to be a dynamic image that you're not accustomed to getting.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So that's one of the concepts. And there were 11 or 12 other ones. That's how I arrived at 240, right, originally. And I've added a couple since, so it's not 240 anymore technically, because it was going to be a certain number of sessions from each of the 12 options, right? And so to add to 240, right? So now they come in the door, and my first month, so I announced it in December or November, and then I had so many pre-bookings that basically my month of January was full. And I mean in the sense that I felt like, last year I didn't make much money in 2021 in January. Well, I didn't make any in 2021 because I didn't start until, I want to say March or April. But that next January, I didn't make that much money in January. Well, now I had such a full January. But within the first week, I recognized something in the same way that when I photographed the musician, when I was learning my settings, and they came up to me like, who are you working for? Where can we see that image? I was like, huh? I'm giving these to you too? I didn't even think about that. You want to see these? I'm just practicing.
Right.
Well, in the same way that I was kind of baffled that way, I didn't even think that you would come in, Jerry, you're sitting down getting the shot with me. I make the 2 images that you're going to get, and you're going to be like, what about that 5th one that we shot too? Or the 15th one? I want those 2 too. Those look great. I was like, oh, well, how am I going to deliver those too? Well, let me just change my structure. And you have to be, this is another thing for creatives. Flexible. Have your vision, but be flexible.
Yeah.
Right? Flexibility is the greatest sign of maturity. I tell that to everybody.
Tunnel vision will kill a lot of great ideas.
Absolutely. So all of a sudden I was just like, you know what? Sure. You want to see that one in color? Oh, okay. Well, let's go ahead and convert it to color. Because I had shot tethered, so everything was shot and formatted in color or in black and white and exposed for it. And I adjusted my settings so that it suited your skin tone, and everything was done and dialed in. So then you convert it to color, and all of a sudden your skin's like green because of the adjustments that I made to make it look right.
Right.
Which is a really good trick to show them that, turning it into a good black and white image is not just turning a button.
Yeah.
So then they see that, like, oh, wow, he knows something that I would never have known. So you're showing them. Show them better than you can tell them.
Yeah.
Right? That's the other thing, too.
Yeah.
So now I've got them in my studio, in my space.
Yeah. They're comfortable.
At this $50 price point, they get to see this experience that's way more than the Olin Mills experience, or way more than the Sears Roebuck or J.C. Penney.
Well, because then you think back to their experience where they sat in a stuffy lobby and then they just waited. The Adkins family, they went and, Dad, you stand there. Mom, okay. Picture. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Right.
you.
Nowadays, those are like trendy, like comical trends.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's fun. But
I'm going to do that. I'm going to bring my family.
And I can do that.
We're going to do a Sears shoot at Rafael Barker.
Right. So then the funny thing with that was, okay, so now, again, not knowing what you don't know, right, as a business person who's just starting out, right? Yeah. I never anticipated that you would want more than the images that I was planning on presenting. Yeah. So now it's an opportunity where I can restructure how I'm doing this. Now, it's not even mentioned that you're getting 2 images from me. Mm-hmm. You are paying $45 per image for the ones you want afterwards. We shoot the whole session. You choose all your favorites. You pay for those in addition to the $50. And then after the shoot, because after the shoot immediately, you choose your favorites. Those are the ones that I edit.
In the studio.
Makes my job easier. They go home. By the time they're home, the images are pretty much ready to go because they're only going to get, in most cases, 7 to 10 photos.
And if you're doing everything in camera,
pretty much dialed in,
then you're pretty well done at that point. It's just retouches.
And then cropping to adjust for the way that they want it to look. Right. So then you choose the 2 that are your legitimate favorites and include those in.
And those go into your project.
And then those 2 are the ones that could potentially be part of the book project if I end up ever finishing that.
Gotcha.
So that was my question. Is it how's it end?
So it's funny. So the end point would look like if I had enough sessions of each of the session types that I could then piece together a book that would be interesting.
Right.
That wasn't just because I didn't cap it because I realized all of a sudden, this is actually profitable if I don't stop at just
if everybody bought the
one session, and all of a sudden I got 75 sessions of just
your
that
book
type.
is 240 faces of hugging your dog.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So for me, I was just like, well, I don't want to say no, but now I also have to be more, again, flexible that it may not be right away that I'll get the recipe shots or the hand shots or you listening to your favorite song shots or you holding your favorite photo shots, right? It may take a little longer for those images to come into my collection for me to then say which one of those has impact to a story, right? So I would say there's no cap yet. I haven't gotten to a number where I feel that I have enough of the variety that I would want. But that's not to say that I'm not booking those sessions. I am still booking them.
And the plan's a photo book? And
the plan would be to have a photo book because I do think that would be, and it's funny because I had a conversation with a headshot client the other day because they were wanting to know a bit more about the things that I offer. And I showed her that post that had the details on the 240 faces. And she goes, oh, that session looks really interesting. And I said, which one? She's like, the one with my best friend. I've never had a professional photo with my best friend. I was like, that's why I chose that option. Yeah. Because how many times have you truly been in a studio space with your best friend?
It's always family.
And had a photo.
Yeah. Or colleagues.
And then the other side of that one is you have your own relationship with child 1 that you might not have with child 2. Right? So here's the funny thing that, again, you don't know until you start experiencing it firsthand. The kids come in for the 30-second hug shot, right? But then kid number 1 wants their own. I have an idea,
right?
And you're like, okay. Well, let's see what Johnny can do. And then Colette over here says, I want to do this. And then you're like, oh, okay. Well, guess what you've just done? You've
sold 3 photos.
You've sold 3 photos, exactly, right? And so then Dad's not going to get Colette's and not get Johnny's,
right?
Yeah. Right.
Sorry, that's an extra $90 that you just threw into the pot, right? But the better part of that is the imagery is going to be very organic, and it's going to be true to who Colette is, and it's going to be true to who Johnny is.
It also affords you an opportunity as a studio owner to build value while they're there,
right?
As opposed to throwing a big sticker up and saying, this is...
Give me a call.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, right. And that's the other thing because they get to walk out and choose knowing. So I'm imagining as the client, right? I've walked into the studio space. I've told I've got my kid. I'm going to hug on the kid, and okay, those are the shots that I want. And then I'm leaving the session. I know the kid is excited because they've seen the shots that we're going to take home. Mm-hmm. I'm excited because I'm going to go tell my wife, look at the shots that we're going to get. I know that we purchased 4. I'm so excited. And then he told me there will be 2 more. I don't even know which ones he's going to choose.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't realize from the client's perspective, right? But then the other side of it too is it's going to be such a different, I would hope, experience for them in the studio space than just going into a different photographer space where all they're doing is shooting the shot that they were asking for.
Like the Sears.
Well, then you also have the excitement.
What I was going to say is that then they're going to tell their friends, hey, I just did a 240 faces session with Rafael Barker Photography. Do you know about that? No. What is it? Well, here's the link. And let me tell you, the experience was different than anything I've had in a studio space. I think you guys would really enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
And there's repeat business.
Yeah. Or let's go a different direction. Then they say, well, now Colette is 19 years old, 7 years later, all of a sudden, and it's like, I need to get X number of shots, and I have a graduation or this or that or whatever. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, I know that they're already comfortable with him.
That last time went really well.
Yeah. Let's do that again.
Yeah.
But this time I'm going to pay $900 plus tax because I know that I don't want to just choose one photo.
Well, I mean, we tie memories to purchases, in everything that we do. Right. And whenever you consider experience, I sold cars for years, okay? And so customer experience was always a big thing for me. And whenever you look at the experience of the person who came in and they test drove the car that they wanted to see, and we delivered fair numbers up front, they were out of there in 3.5 hours, they're on their dinner, that's a good experience as opposed to the 13, 14-hour car deal where we've just grinded on every number and then they leave still wondering what the heck happened. Why did I buy this car? And I'm never seeing these people again. This was awful. I hate this car. This car's going to be junk.
That's me right now with my wife's car.
But you tie those experiences into those purchases. Yeah. And if you have that experience looking at a photo and it's hanging in your house, every time you look at that photo, you tie that memory to it. I have photos from my wedding that I'm not entirely thrilled with, because I think, okay, if you'd have just stepped to your right and been a professional, this would have turned out great.
Right.
But instead, I have crooked photos hanging on my wall, and I'm upset about it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But people do that, whether you're spending $90 in an afternoon or you decide to spend $400 or $500, have your whole family,
right.
You do a whole wall of photos. It's just different. Right. And whenever you're able to tie positive emotion into that experience, you're going to see success organically.
Yeah.
Just because people enjoy talking about you. Man, I had a good time. I'm going to go see him just to hang out.
Well, and that was the other piece I was going to say, too. People want to see you win.
Yeah.
I think more than anything, even competitors, they want to see you win because if you're winning, then it gives them an opportunity for them to win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People don't genuinely want you to fail. So if you can be present and feel comfortable with that person where they're vulnerable with you,
and
then you're present in a vulnerable way with them,
they're
going to remember how you made them feel. That Maya Angelou quote is absolutely true, and it's a way to live your life.
Yeah,
and for those of you that don't know, it's people don't remember what you said or what you did, but they remember how you make them feel.
Right.
That's the Maya Angelou quote.
Right.
See, I'm a big Zig Ziglar guy, and he says that you can get everything that you ever wanted in life if you help enough people get what they want.
That's right.
That's a good one.
And
too.
so I believe in that. If I can help
too.
you achieve your dreams, then I will eventually achieve my dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
so,
and especially as an entrepreneur who is a creative, you have to remind yourself, because we can sit on an edit into perpetuity and just edit everything out of that image. But if it meets what the client wanted, it's done.
Yep.
Deliver it.
Yeah.
Move on. Kill your darlings, right?
Yeah.
You have to recognize that it's not perfect for you. It's perfect for them.
Yeah.
And that goes the other way if we're going into conversations about what a client can afford. Another thing for creatives to absolutely recognize, whether you're doing voice acting, whether you're working in the military, people can tell you what they can afford, but they cannot tell you what you're worth.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing that I'll tell people at any point, whether that's a relationship. I tell you that, what I can afford is communication. What I can't afford is that there's a gap where I don't know.
Yeah.
Because the not knowing is going to drive me crazy.
Yeah.
Right. But what I can't tell you is that you're wrong for this, 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 and this. And what I'm saying is I'm like naming personality traits that are at your core who you are.
Right.
I can't change you, and that shouldn't be my goal. Right. And it's the same way as a creative. Like if somebody comes back to me and says, they've purchased a $50 mini session, right? And they've got 3 photos and they want to come back to me and ask me to edit that photo 75 times. That's above the amount that they paid.
Right.
Right. That's why in that session style, I had set the parameters for, I'm going to dictate the crop. I'm going to dictate what lens I'm using. I'm going to dictate that it's black and white, because now there won't be any, now can you do this in color? Can you do this, this, and this? I was like, well, if you want that, part of our options are you can purchase it.
Yeah. Right.
Great.
And then
I'll do that.
Business as usual.
And then it's business as usual when you get paid.
We're going to have to rename this episode Setting Expectations for Clients and Delivering on Those Expectations.
We had a great converation. This is it's been really good. I have one question, but unless you...
go ahead. Yeah.
I have one question for all 4 of us before we sign off here. I saw this on TikTok. I wrote it in my notes app. So if you could shoot, you have to pick one. These are 2-word answers, okay? You had to pick one focal length, so 24 millimeter, 50 millimeter, and one aperture to shoot at for the rest of your life. What do you shoot at? What's your choice? I thought it would be interesting for this one because we have a photographer, we have videographer.
So it has to be a prime. It can't be I can choose a lens, right?
You can choose a lens,
I would
but it
say,
just has to be focal length and. It's
right, so I can be like a 28 to 75.
No.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah, so
Prime.
prime. Yeah,
Okay.
prime.
Okay.
It can be any prime, right?
I would say a 105.
Mm-hmm.
Because I in my mind, I imagine there will be more portrait work.
It's a really good portrait lens. Yeah.
I would say 105 and then 4.2.
4.2, okay.
I like it.
Yeah.
Or 5.6.
5.6.
Yeah. I can go with that.
Because I think for me, I can be far back enough that I can still do the full body if I want in the studio space, but it's really going to compress in a good way.
That compression's nice.
And the compression is so important. And I'm not somebody, because I want to make sure that I get every part of the person in focus, who's enamored by the trend to have a bunch of milky bokeh in a shot. It's not something that I'm definitely attracted to necessarily, because it's not what the eye sees.
Right.
Right. So it looks manufactured in let's say if you're outdoors and you're doing the 1.2.
Yeah.
Right.
And then everything else washes off. And I'm just like, yeah, but that's not how it really looks.
Right.
It's a cool concept and it's a cool look, and I'll do it from time to time. But for me, man, it's really cool if I can just get every bit of the person in focus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say, let's say 105 at 5.6.
5.6. All right. What about you, Jerry?
The 85.
Okay.
I have that lens too.
I was going to say an 85, right around that, the 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Come around there.
Carson?
All right. Just to be different, I'm going to say we'll stay at 70.
Okay.
And then aperture, I really haven't messed around with it much.
Yeah.
I couldn't really give you a...
Do you like the bokeh, the creamy blur
So
in the
you shoot on a
background?
nifty 50 a lot, right?
Yeah, I do. So, I mean, 50 would also be a good option.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good one.
Actually, we'll say 50. We'll say 50, and then, I don't know.
That's a
I don't
great
know.
Wide open.
Yeah, we'll give it something.
F22.
Oh man, I'd say the 50 is great for street photography.
Yeah.
So that's a really nice one for if you just
I love
running around.
My film camera, they all have 50 on them. They look great.
Yeah.
For me, I was going to say 85 too. I was going to say 85. I'm going to be different. I'm surprised with the high compression for you.
Yeah.
I figured a photographer would want more 24 or something like that.
Well, for me, I had the 28 to 75 in my pocket. That's the one I was going to go to.
Right.
And so I was going to do 28 to 75, 5.6.
I think I'm going to be different like Carson did. I think I'm going to go with a 35. I think I'll... And I'll
at 2, you're gonna do 35 at 2.
I think I'm gonna go 2.8, possibly 3.5. I like the not so much that it's like super in your face, but it's just a nice defocus in the background. But if I could pick anything, it'd be the 85.
So if
It'd be the 85 at about a 4.5.
Well, I've got in my next kit to purchase thing, I've got a 35 to 150, 2 to 2.8.
Oh, that's
The Tamron.
2.8.
Yeah. So wide open. It's 2 at 35.
Yeah.
It's 2.8 everywhere else.
Yeah, that's nice.
I like that.
That's nice.
And that would be the type of versatility that allows me to do any job with the one lens, but still have the others.
right.
Yeah. I'm waiting until I get a second camera so I can have the portrait lens on one and then the 35 to 150 on the other.
Yeah. You know, we'll have to have you back on because, I mean, we talked about photo and business most of the time.
We didn't get a chance to talk about the film
But
festivals.
you're credited in my movie. I mean, you're in there, so we'll have to have you on again sometime.
Yeah.
Well, for all of us at the
Thank
Appalachian
you. Yeah.
Creative Podcast, Raphael, thank you for
course.
coming on.
Great.
We enjoyed the conversation, and
Don't spill all my secrets. When you're editing this down, don't keep some of them for later.
and
Where can people find your work?
yeah.
Yeah, man. I'm one of those weirdos who doesn't have a website yet. It's kind of been a funny project of being able to sustain it just through word of mouth and social media. Facebook is Rafael Barker Photography. Instagram is RAFBARKER or Rafael Barker BW. I have a black and white page too. I'm obsessed with
Both
black
are
and white.
worth a great follow.
Yeah. I have a link tree. If you know how to do a link tree, it's whatever the link tree handle is / Rafael Barker Photography.
Okay.
And that would give you access to a contact that you can add to your phone, my email, my Instagram, my Facebook, Cash App, Venmo.
Awesome.
Whatever. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, it's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. For all of us at the Appalachian Creative Podcast, that is it for today. Happy New Year, and have a good day. See ya.